So you are frustrated because your images of moving subjects like flying birds or sports don't turn out sharp? In this video I will share several tips and tricks that will help you change that. Okay, so we have set the focus point and maybe even enabled face detection. But let me show you something. When I press the shutter button halfway to focus on my face and then I move closer, I'm suddenly out of focus. Or what if I press the shutter button halfway and then the camera moves closer? The same. That's pretty annoying, right? The good news is that there is a camera setting that will take care of that issue. So far we have used a focus mode called AFS, with S standing for single and AF obviously standing for autofocus. So the camera will focus one single time and then keep the focus setting. That can be a big problem, particularly for fast-moving subjects. Let's consider your dog is running towards the camera. From the moment you press the shutter button halfway to focus to the moment you pressed it down fully to take the image, the dog has moved further towards you and left the plane you focused on. That's definitely not what we want. Luckily, there is another focus mode called AFC, with C standing for continuous. So instead of focusing once, the camera will continue focusing as long as you press the shutter button halfway. So now if I go closer, my face or eyes will stay in focus. Talking about eyes, by the way, your goal is always to focus on the eyes, no matter if you photograph humans or animals. Only if the eyes are in focus, your image is considered to be in focus. If your subject looks to the side, you always want the one eye sharp that is closer to the camera. If the other one is sharp, it is usually considered to be out of focus. Back to AFS and AFC. If AFC is focusing continuously, isn't that the perfect solution for everything, you may ask? It sounds pretty convenient if the camera takes care of that. Well, not exactly. For decades, AFS was the more accurate focus mode. The camera simply took more time to precisely focus on what you told it to focus on. And if you gave it more time, it did a better job. For images of non-moving subjects like flowers, landscapes, and for portraits. So whenever possible, you would choose AFS. That now slowly changes. For the newest so-called mirrorless cameras, focus in general is so precise and accurate that it doesn't really matter if you use AFS or FC. So you can basically always use AFC. Now, how do you know if your camera is that good at AFC? You can only experiment and see how good it really is. In general though, if the light gets low, cameras struggle much more. So it is a good idea to be familiar with both focus modes, so that you can change when needed. But your camera has two more very helpful settings that can help improve your focus. First of all, I want to introduce you to something that I personally don't use, but many others totally love it. The technique is called back button focusing. What is it all about? For some people, well, probably even for a lot of people, focusing by pressing the shutter button halfway and then fully pressing down the shutter button is not something they are really comfortable with. Luckily, camera manufacturers give you the option to assign a button on the back of your camera to focus, and that will free the shutter button to only release the shutter. So, focus, image, focus, image. I would recommend giving that a try, particularly if you feel that pressing the shutter button halfway is somehow tricky. I cannot tell you how exactly assigning the back button on your camera works, because there are a gazillion different cameras out there, but just Google your camera and back button focus and there will be lots of tutorials on how you can do that. People get very emotional over back button focusing, just like they get emotional over everything that has to do with photography. I sincerely ask you, don't go down that route. If you like it better, awesome. If you don't, why do you want to make others use your method? Doesn't make sense at all. We are all way too different to use the same technique. Some have a faster trigger finger, others have a faster thumb. All good. You don't gain anything if you force others to use the same technique you do. All it weirdly does is make you emotional and create hate. Okay, but back on topic. That was the first trick I was talking about. There is one more, a bonus trick so to say, but before we get to that, we need to talk about manual focus. There are certain situations where the camera will not focus on the subject you want. That includes extreme low light, like for example taking images of the Milky Way, or photographing through a fence in a zoo, where the camera doesn't know whether you want to focus on the fence or on the animal. And since I told you that it usually focuses on the closer subject, chances are that you'd get a lot of fancy fence images. Luckily, manual focus has come a long way and there are two tools that make it much easier. First and foremost, you can magnify your subject on your display. On a DSLR, you would have to change to live view to get the live image onto your display. On a mirrorless camera, it's always there. You can even view the live image when looking through the viewfinder, which can be helpful if it is really bright outside and you can hardly see the image in the display. Then you can change to manual focus, and while the image is magnified, you can see so much better whether your subject is in focus or not. Most cameras will even automatically magnify the area around your chosen focus point as soon as you start rotating the focus ring. Once you let go, the display jumps back to the normal, unmagnified view. Now, I have mentioned the Milky Way. That is particularly tricky to manual focus as the stars are very dim and small. I will create a dedicated Milky Way, or better said stars photography course soon, but one thing I want to mention when it comes to focusing is a great tool that I found, the Focus on Stars filter. It's a derivation from the well-known Bahtinov masks that helps you focus on stars. But the latter has its flaws, particularly when it comes to wide-angle Milky Way shots. If you want to make sure that your Milky Way images are sharp, have a look at this filter. But as I said, more on that in a later course. If you want to get notified, make sure you subscribe to my email list. For regular manual focus, there is another function I want to mention that is built into many cameras. It was brought into photo cameras from video cameras, the so-called focus peaking. You can set that in most cameras so that in live view you will get a colorful overlay over the edge of areas that are supposed to be sharp. Now, I said that this was taken from video cameras, and that's why I wouldn't necessarily recommend it for photography. Reason being is that it is not as exact as zooming in, and it would not deliver the reliable results you really want, particularly when shooting at very low f numbers like f1.4 or f1.8. where the depth of focus is really shallow. And when talking about focus and sharpness, I want to reveal another secret for you. Editing tools have become much more powerful in this regard, and images that aren't all that sharp to begin with can easily be made sharp with software. My software of choice in this regard is Topaz Sharpen AI. No, this is not a sponsored message, I just personally often use it even on images that are actually sharp, as Sharpen AI doesn't over-sharpen the image if you use it correctly. However, don't expect wonders for images that are completely out of focus, but slightly out of focus images can be improved big time. If you are interested, give it a try. They have a trial version. I'll put a link below the video. Okay, now for the last trick, which has become my favorite focus tool. It's not actually a trick, but rather a setting, a way to focus. It is called focus tracking. Well, some cameras call it focus tracking. I'm sure there are some out there that have a weird name for it. Just like every camera function seems to need a different name on different cameras. Manufacturers are weirdos and pretty selfish too. What does focus tracking do and how does it work? Once enabled, I set the focus point over the subject I want to track, and then I simply hold the shutter button halfway. The camera then registers the subject, and no matter if the subject moves or if I move the camera, it tracks the subject across the frame. That is a game changer when it comes to tracking a motorbike driver, a flying bird, or anything that moves fast. You can now concentrate on framing the subject and leave the focus to the camera. Logically, it doesn't work on every camera. Just imagine you have an entry-level or older DSLR with 9 focus points that are additionally scattered across the center of the frame. If your subject moves somewhere in between the focus points or somewhere into the corner of the frame, how could the camera focus if it doesn't have a focus sensor there? Modern and higher-end cameras have 600 plus focus sensors scattered across the complete frame, so they can focus on wherever the subject moves. So as I said before, don't let anyone tell you photography is all about the photographer. Focusing on modern advanced cameras is 1000 times easier than with entry-level cameras. That again doesn't mean that you have to buy the latest and greatest gear, but it means that if you don't have one of these cameras and your images are often out of focus, it's not necessarily your fault. Even the best pros might have a lot of out of focus shots with your camera. Many professionals obviously want to make you feel subpar and make them appear as the best thing since sliced bread. But back on topic, let me just show you as an example how easy it is to set focus tracking on my camera. Instead of selecting a regular focus point, I can just select the tracking point. I have different sizes available, I only have to select one of them and I can start focus tracking. Super easy, super convenient. When appropriate, you usually don't need focus tracking for regular portraits. Oh, I forgot, there is another focus trick. Enroll to the super affordable and effective Voth method that accompanies this course. Part of it is a dedicated drill training for focus. That will transfer your focus settings to muscle memory and frees your brain's capacity for the creative part of photography. You can enroll at VothArmory.com. Talking about creativity, we will soon get to the most creative parts of photography. But before we do, we have that final exposure lesson waiting in the next video.